Good evening, and welcome to a special night of conversation presented by St. John's University's Collins College of Professional Studies in conjunction with the Division of Sports Management. I'm Tariq Turner, proud St. John's alum, 1999 graduate, and former student athlete, as well as board of trustee member. I also was the co-captain of the men's basketball team in my senior year. It's an honor to serve as host for tonight's virtual webinar featuring Dr. Jonathan Scheiman, Ph.D. His lecture is appropriately titled Athlete to Scientist to CEO. Dr. Scheiman is a distinguished St. John's University graduate. He was an honor student who majored in biology and was a member of St. John's men's basketball team that won the 2000 Big East Championship and 2003 NIT. After a career in professional basketball seemed out of reach upon graduation, he turned his passion to science, earning a prominent doctorate degree from NYU, New York University. After that, a move to accept a prestigious fellowship from Harvard University Medical School fostered his dream to own a startup company connecting his two favorite passions, science and sports. That's what makes this story so remarkable, but it gets even better. Now, Dr. Scheiman is CEO of Fitbiomics, a microbiome biotechnology company. I'm going to let him explain that because it's a little bit over my head. He will talk this evening about his career trajectory and how St. John's University molded his path to success. But before we get to Dr. Scheiman's lecture, I would like to go over our format quickly for tonight's webinar, just to give the students and everyone an idea of what the night's going to be like. We want this to be a two-way event, not just us talking to the students. We want to have some feedback, some questions, and just have a fun atmosphere for everyone to learn and kind of get Dr. Scheiman's perspective of what it was like for him transitioning from a student athlete to a professional. So first, Dr. Scheiman will take you through an informative presentation highlighting his career. Secondly, we will open things up for a question and answer session where you guys can ask whatever you like and get some advice and feedback from Dr. Scheiman.
Tariq, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. So all throughout the night, you will be able to post questions on the Fitbiomics Instagram, which is Instagram at Fitbiomics, and you should see that on the chat, on the comments section as well. I will get the Q&A session started after Dr. Scheiman's speech, and then we'll take some questions from the guests, and you guys can ask Dr. Scheiman whatever you want. So we ask for your patience and hope that we can get as many questions as we can during our allotted time frame tonight. So without further ado, I give you my friend and fellow St. John's basketball player, teammate, alum, Dr. Jonathan Scheiman. John, welcome back to your alma mater. It's great being with you tonight to hear your captivating story.
Oh, man. Tariq, thank you so much. I'm just going to go ahead and boot this up and screen share my presentation. Man, I just got to say, hearing you call me Dr. Scheiman is kind of crazy in and of itself. I mean, I'm just a ball player, first and foremost. So that's, but I appreciate this. This is, man, first of all, thank you to everyone for coming out in these unprecedented times. I think every day is a new adventure. And, hopefully this evening could just be a time for our community to come together and really enjoy this in sort of an unscripted format. I want to give a shout out to obviously the College of Professional Studies, Alex Evans, Dominic, Tariq, Nick Vendicos, David Headland for making this happen. And I think for me, this is just really a special opportunity to sort of come back to my home and community and This is going to be, I think, kind of just like my evolution over the past 20 years. It's around 30 minutes, but again, I want this to be fun, and hopefully it could spark a great conversation after this. So I guess without further ado, I'll just get started. So, I'm a New York City kid. I grew up in Greenwich Village, Manhattan. I was born in 1981. Yes, I know Chris Mullin and Mark Jackson. I watched them in the NBA, but for me, this was really sort of my somewhat introduction to St. John's. I think, New York being the mecca of basketball, hopefully it still is. I think all of us had hoop dreams growing up. And I think the Big East and St. John's and Felipe in this cover, it's just so iconic. And for me, it was my first introduction. I went to LaGuardia High School for performing arts. I was a tuba player, just FYI, so everyone knows about that. My senior year was 1999, and this was St. John's in 1999, and some of the things. I remember my senior trip watching St. John's play Duke at Madison Square Garden. The big thing was Bootsy Thornton dropping 40 on Duke. I was like, who is Bootsy Thornton? And then, just everything. Ron, who went to LaSalle, and like Eric Barkley going to the Elite Eight, Coach Jarvis. So again, this is me, a New York City kid growing up, being a senior in Manhattan, having hoop dreams and seeing the local New York's team sort of come to prominence. But I also want to say, I feel for my generation, I feel like growing up in the 80s and the 90s, very much a hip hop generation. My first album was Tribe Called Quest. We had Biggie, Nas, and Jay-Z. And I remember this in 1999, this Nas song, Nas is Like, and I love this song. I still listen to it to this day. Where I remember seeing Ron Artest and Reggie Jesse in this video and like flashing the St. John's sort of like uniforms. I remember when I found out I was going to St. John's, I was with one of my good friends and we were riding in a car and he was more hyped than me. He was like, oh my goodness, you're going to meet Nas. You're going to St. John's. I was like, sounds good to me. So I think, the city game and growing up, this is what I thought of St. John's. I attended fall of 99. I went to 03. I think the cool thing about being on the St. John's basketball team is you get your own ESPN profile page. This is a picture of me cutting down the nets in the Big East Championship. And I think during my tenure as a walk-on, not to say that I played a lot, but I would say we had a fair amount of success. We won the Big East Championship. We went to 2 NCAA tournaments. We went to the Great Alaskan Shootout in 2001. And then my senior year, we won an NIT Championship. And just so many experiences along the way, playing against so many great players, so many memories. Just an amazing, awesome experience. And obviously I was a ball player, but I was also a biology major and a creative writing minor. My senior year, we had a lot of fun as well. I'll play this video. Hopefully it plays. This is me in the background. That's me jumping up with the headband. That's me. This is my senior year at Madison Square Garden when Marcus Hatton hit a last 0 time on the clock and we beat Duke at Madison Square Garden my senior year. We were 13-13 at the time. We beat them by 1, and that propelled us to the NIT Championship. We also had a lot of other fun experiences too. This was an interesting sort of end of the game experience in Madison Square Garden. We beat UConn. They had Caron Butler, and they were a pretty formidable team at that time. And backstage, we had Bill Clinton and Jay-Z join us after the game. These are the sorts of things, that happens at St. John's and being in the city and being New York's team. I just remember Coach Jarvis after the game saying, oh man, we got the president of the US and Jay-Z get in here. We got the king of New York too. And I think New York was, St. John's was such a fun experience. By the way, this is me in the background in case you can't see. I'm standing next to Willie Shaw, who was 6'6", and Alpha Bangura, who was 6'5". I'm 6'2", so I had to stand on my tippy toes just to make sure I made it into the picture. And just so you know, that wasn't the only experience we had with Jay-Z. This was my junior year. I'll just pause it there. Well, I'll pause it there for a second. These are the benefits of going to St. John's and being on New York's team. A lot of people don't know that Jay-Z was at a lot of our games. I remember my freshman year, we had Rockefeller Madness. We had Rockaware supporting us. And, this was kind of cool. And just some of these things that happened when you go to St. John's. I had a very fun experience. As a New York City kid, I wanted to go to the league. I had hoop dreams. I wanted to play and be in the NBA. That was my aspirations. There was only one problem. I wasn't that great of a ball player. I was a walk-on. I didn't really play that much. It's nice of sort of like Basketball Reference to point out that I had a 0.3 points per game average. So for me, I knew the NBA wasn't really in my future. I like to show this. This is me, I think, back in 2002 during the NCAA tournament. We were playing Wisconsin. I got in the game. I wanted to play the NBA. These are the statistics, right, of how many people make the NBA. So for me, I didn't make the NBA, but my backup plan was getting a Ph.D. in molecular biology. So that's kind of how I became a scientist. And if you want to ask sort of, well, what separates John Scheiman, the basketball player, from John Scheiman, the scientist and the Ph.D.? Well, it's actually a pretty simple answer. An order of magnitude difference between my points per game average and my GPA. For me, while professional basketball wasn't in my future, I think being a biology major and sort of getting good grades in school allowed other opportunities for me. So, I think this is a question that many college students have, right? I didn't make the league. I didn't make the NBA. And when you graduate, especially during these times, the question is, now what? So for me, I think I always try to look to what am I passionate about? What are my interests? And what can I sort of turn into a career? Obviously, basketball, arts, movies, science. I was a biology major. Some of the things that interested me as a biology major, I went to a lot of zoos as a kid, a lot of aquariums. I had a lot of pets. I was very interested in sort of like biology, evolution, diversity, genotypes to phenotypes, form fits function. And again, also growing up in New York, I was fortunate to have two parents that were teachers. They had PhDs. My brother is a public school teacher. So I was very interested in also education as well, in science and things of that nature. The step for me as a biology major and then having some sort of research experience, I decided maybe going to grad school was a good idea. And one thing that Coach Jarvis said to me kind of halfway through my St. John's tenure was like, you may not play that much, but just being on the team, I think, is going to open opportunities for you. And I remember going to NYU, which is where I got my PhD from. During the interview day, I think the dean of graduate school called me out in a room of around 30 or 40 people. I said, who's John Scheiman? And we got into this conversation from everyone. And I told him I had to go to Madison Square Garden that night for an NIT basketball game, a semifinal. And he said, oh, you must be in the prep bands. I said, no, actually, I'm on the basketball team. And he was like, what? And then he's like, well, can you get me tickets to Madison Square Garden? And I said, well, it depends. Are you going to accept me to your program? So that was basically the transition from being a ball player to getting into grad school. And as the story goes, 7 years later, I got my PhD. So, I just want to share, maybe I didn't make it to the league as a ball player, but I think being a part of St. John's and being a ball player, how it opens up doors. This was literally things that happened during my interview session with all these world-renowned scientists. The first question I got on my interviews, or the first statement was, man, your GPA is higher than your points per game average. So I was like, all right, sounds good. And then during these interviews, everyone would stop every 5 minutes and say, hey, what are your thoughts on the NCAA? Who's going to win it this year? The one thing that's also important to note is I remember after I got accepted to NYU PhD program, the dean of the school actually came up to me and he said, you know what? Sometimes we take a chance on people and you find a diamond in the rough. And I think the important thing to note is, getting your foot in the door by being sort of associated with a prestigious program such as St. John's. It opens up doors. This is something that my coach said to me. And you just got to leverage that. And once you get your foot in the door, then you have an opportunity to sort of prove yourself in different mediums. This is sort of my grad school experience, by the way. It took me 7 years to get a PhD. And most of what you do in science doesn't work. It's a constant sort of iterative process and sort of experimentation and learning from your failures and then sort of moving on into designing new experiments. Kind of like basketball. Just to give you some of the stats, tuition was free health insurance, but as a student in New York, we had a stipend of around $30,000 a year. So I wasn't actually raking in the dough. My mentor told me grad school is a lot like being dumped in the middle of a lake blindfolded and having to find your way back. Again, science research is kind of like that. It's unpredictable. Most of what you do doesn't work. It's a big black box, but it's a huge learning experience. And also, I'll just stick with the basketball terminology. I remember during my thesis defense, after I defended, I actually went overseas to try out professionally. And one of the motivating factors for my sort of thesis committee was getting me graduated in time so I could go overseas to try out to play basketball. So again, use what you got, right? I mean, if you're a ball player, yes, you could be a scientist, but I think leverage your community and your network to sort of help facilitate your progression. And this is kind of stuff I did in NYU. I was a biomedical science major. I worked on molecular oncology. And, there was a lot of research that went into this. I really learned a lot, published a couple of papers and things of that nature. But another thing I also did, speaking about education and each one teach one, while in grad school for 7 years, I actually coached public high school basketball team. And to me, this was one of the more important things that I've done thus far in my life. And I could just say as a ball player, I think I was maybe 22 in this picture, fresh out of St. John's, starting grad school, but working with kids that maybe were only a few years younger than me, and sort of like teaching them my skills as a basketball player, teaching them what I learned from St. John's, but then also, trying to introduce them to science as well. This is something that I always think about, how can we sort of work with the next generation, and not only just from a basketball perspective, but teach them skills for life. And that's actually a term that, Coach Jarvis taught to me. So, here I am sort of after, grad school, I'm coaching and stuff like that. I was a former basketball player. Just to give you a sense of sort of my role models and how I view science. Again, when I grew up, I'm heavily influenced by pop culture. Dr. Peter Venkman was one of my role models for grad school. I remember going on an initial interview and they asked me, why do you want to go to grad school? I was like, I don't know. I think it could be fun. I want to be a Ghostbuster. It's more challenging and more rewarding than just having fun, but that's something that I think resonated with me. And then as I got a little bit older, when I was done with grad school, having a Ph.D., trying out professionally, and then also being a coach, I didn't really know what to do. But actually watching the movie Iron Man and seeing Tony Stark and just seeing how cool he was and seeing how he used technology as a superpower, it kind of said to me, you know what, maybe I should stay in science and sort of try and live this lifestyle of developing technology as a superpower. So that's kind of my story and some of my influences. I think Tyreek might have mentioned after NYU, so St. John's to NYU, PhD, I then went to Harvard to do my postdoctoral fellowship in a biotechnology lab and a synthetic biology lab. And, during my interview, I had very honest and candid conversations with my mentor, who was a prestigious professor at Harvard. And I said, hey, listen, I just want to be upfront. My background is in athletics and the arts. And his response was so meaningful to me and something that resonates still to this day. And he said to me, well, that's what we want. We want people that think differently. And I think that's also another mantra I try to have and that I've learned over these years as a basketball player to being a scientist to an entrepreneur. You don't want to be like everyone else, right? You want to think differently because that's what sets you apart. And again, my first day in the lab at Harvard, literally they welcomed me and they said, here's your bench, go work on something and good luck. So they kind of tossed me into the fire, if you will, and hoped that I would come out surviving. Another thing that I learned too is that as much as basketball is a team sport, so is science and so is biotechnology. Now, I got to say, I was a ball player. I then studied molecular oncology and biomedicine. I then went to a completely different field in terms of genomics and biotechnology and synthetic biology. And this was a very steep learning curve for me. But the important thing is surrounding yourself in a community of really smart people that are trying to be innovative and basically coming together and working as a team to sort of, really build new technologies. And these are some of the publications I worked on. Everything from decoding RNA molecules inside cells to actually using transcriptional factors to reprogram stem cells into neurons, like crazy stuff. But this is the sort of stuff that we did at Harvard. And I'll just say, you build these connections, you build these teams. In many ways, it's similar to being a ball player. Like, these are your teammates for numerous years. You spend most of your hours and time with them. I'll also just say, for me, I take joy in this. When I was at St. John's, I was a walk-on. I came from Greenwich Village. I came from an arts high school. I was the science kid. I feel like everyone on the team was like, hey, Scheiman, what do you think about this? When I got to Harvard, I was the athlete in the room, which to me was a very cool, different change in perspective. And I always liken it to like being Vince Vaughn in The Internship, where you're this older guy that's surrounded by all these smart people, but you're like the cool guy in the room. And, I got my Ph.D. when I was 28. I went to Harvard when I was 30. I left Harvard when I was 36. So you have all these like 20-something-year-olds that are at Harvard and MIT, and they're looking to me like, hey, John, can you tell us about your stories at Madison Square Garden and playing basketball? So I think for me, it was a very cool full circle perspective. So, 2 years, this is another common theme. Now what? I think 2 years at Harvard, again, PhD, I published these papers, I'm like 32 years old. But now what? What am I going to do? What is this science and technology really going to do to my career? And, I kind of go back to what I'm passionate about, right? Science, evolution, genotype to phenotype, each one teach one. I think for me, again, heavily influenced by pop culture, sports, and movies, thinking about St. John's in 1999, this was sort of like the movie scene in 1999. And hopefully most of you recognize this film in The Matrix. But I think this scene was like mind-blowing to me. The notion of looking at our environment and our surroundings and seeing everything in terms of a blueprint or a code. And this scene is one of my favorite scenes of all time. I think The Matrix is one of my top 10 favorite films, but I just love this line that, Neo being trained to the ways of the Matrix and blueprints and codes, talking to Morpheus and saying like, are you saying I'll be able to dodge bullets? And Morpheus saying, no, Neo, when you're ready, you won't have to. So basically, if we could decode the Matrix, we could almost make the world how we see it. This may be esoteric and a tangent, but I'll bring it back into biology and biotechnology and sort of my career and my interests and my passions. Yes, The Matrix is a movie, but one thing we have to consider, well, what about sort of just life in general? Like all these organisms, evolution, diversity, life, what is the nature of this? These blueprints, these genetic codes and things of that nature. And what happens if we're able to actually decode biological information for our organisms that determines evolution and things of that nature. And it has many different functions, right? So I think about blueprints for disease, right? Stopping bullets. If you look at HIV, which is an RNA virus that infects immune cells, there's a genetic code. It integrates into our DNA. What if we understood that code? What if we could prepare our cells to recognize that genetic information and then prevent it from infecting our cells? I mean, look at today, even with COVID, right? This was a paper in the New York Times. And, the notion of understanding the genetic information of COVID, right? And being able to sort of assess it, to track it, see how it mutates over time. And again, what are the implications for understanding this code and then preparing us as a society for combating it and being ready? Other crazy and weird things. Yes, this is a real thing. Jurassic Park. Looking at extinct organisms and their genetic code. Is it possible to look at their DNA and then reinstate that into an organism and then basically bring extinct species back to life? I don't think we'd want to start with a velociraptors or a T-Rex, but maybe other things that might be beneficial to our ecosystem or sort of at-risk species. And then my personal favorite, right? Again, I'm a huge Marvel fan and, obviously RIP to Chadwick. But think about superheroes, right? Is it possible to understand blueprints for superheroes or, people that have supernatural abilities, understand what makes them unique, decode that information and learn from it to benefit society? Now, I know everything I'm talking about, Jurassic Park and Marvel and stuff like that, that seems like, okay, this isn't real. But the question is, are superheroes real, right? And for me personally, being a former athlete, if you look at elite athletes, they run faster, they jump higher, they're stronger, they're more mentally tough. In a sense, elite athletes are sort of these unique superheroes. So again, what if we can understand the blueprints and the codes of these top performers, and what is the relevance for that for everyone else? So I'll kind of go back to this for a second. Again, this was me. You know the story, but as a scientist, I'm a big believer in form fits function. I'm a big believer in natural selection. So if you look at these odds and you look at people that are able to overcome them, again, sticking to blueprints, sticking to sort of bioinformatics and biotechnology, what if we can actually understand the biologies of these elite performers, decode that? And not only what implications would that have for performance, but just overall human health. So, I'm trying to show the transition between being a basketball player to a scientist to now bring it back full circle and bridging these communities together. I think being at Harvard, this was really, I think, what brought it home for me. This is a statement: the holy grail is sequencing and understanding the human genome. Coincidentally, I graduated from St. John's in 2003, and that was actually that was the year the first human genome sequence was published. And again, this is something, if you talk about the human genome, we're talking about 3 billion sort of like nucleotides in our genome. There's a ton of information. It's a project that took 15 years to complete and $3 billion. Today, we could sequence a human genome for $1,000 in 2 days. But this was really like a coming of age for this entire field. So as a scientist, I could say this to you like, okay, John, yeah, we appreciate the fact that you're telling us about biotechnology. What is the relevance to us? Well, interestingly enough, this was a quote by ESPN, the magazine, talking about how genomics and biotechnology can revolutionize performance in athletics. So to me, this was back in 2014. I was still at Harvard, and I was kind of curious of what I should do next in my career in bridging these gaps together. To me, this was almost a sign in that the time was ripe to bridge together my passions in athletics and biotechnology. And this is now transitioning into sort of the work that I've done, with Fitbiomics and being an entrepreneur and what's led into this. When we talk about sort of environments and genetic codes, and diversity and things of that nature, actually, personalized genetics isn't where it's at today. It's not so much about 23andMe. Scientific, fact is, we're actually more bacteria than we are human, right? So we have trillions of microorganisms in our body that greatly influence our functionality, our development, our health. There's applications for disease. If you look at sort of like DNA, right now, I think we have around twice as many bacteria in our body as we do human cells, and we have 100-fold more genetic material, bacteria in our bodies than we do human DNA. So this is a whole ecosystem that we can look to with biotechnology to understand how it affects our performance. And again, this is a whole new trend in the space, our microbial ecosystem being known as our microbiome. And again, just looking at sort of the influence of our bacteria in our body and our microbiome and what these things do. I think coming from biomedicine, we tend to look at disease physiology and what doesn't work. How can we sort of correct that to promote health? But if you look at the microbiome and what it does in our gut, it influences energy metabolism, protein metabolism, neurology, immunology. Okay, that's great from a human physiology perspective. But if you look at athletes, this really translates to, endurance, strength, mental toughness, recovery. So again, what if we looked at super performers, the most fit people in the world? What if we decoded their biology? What if we decoded all of their microorganisms that encode for these different physiological processes? What if we understood that and now we could translate that to benefit the masses? And again, this is sort of the foundation for how I'm going from being an athlete to how I'm going to a scientist to now how I could bring these things together. I spent 2 years at Harvard learning, building technology. And then after that, I decided to pursue this and pursue the applications of biotechnology in sort of athletics. And this took me actually another 4 or 5 years. I didn't leave Harvard till I was 36. So I've been in academia for a long time. We spent a lot of time, we published papers, we did a lot of cool things. This was something that was published a year ago, looking at sort of elite athletes' microbiomes, looking at their bacteria and discovering what's unique or what's enriched in them and how that might drive optimal performance. And we found some really cool things like bacteria that are enriched in ultramarathon runners that eat lactic acid and promote endurance. So a lot of really crazy and cool stuff. I don't know if I really need to go through all this scientific jargon. We could sort of skip that. But, this was a study that I did 5 years ago where we worked with marathon runners, Boston Marathon runners, ultramarathon runners. We looked at their microbiomes. We collected their samples over 2 weeks on a daily basis. We looked at their bacteria, how it compared to non-athletes, how it changed over time, pre and post exercise, pre and post marathon. And one of the things that we discovered was actually a bacteria that's unique in its ability to eat lactic acid and convert it into something that's anti-inflammatory. So again, form fits function, genotype to phenotype, elite athletes, what's unique in them, enrichment in a bacteria that drives endurance. And this is something that we found while working at Harvard, which was pretty cool and exciting for us. We did a lot of other cool things. We looked at this bacteria and its unique nature to not only eat lactic acid, but also convert it into short chain fatty acids, which serve as an energy source for cells. They also serve as an anti-inflammatory source. We then took this bacteria, we did preclinical studies, and we showed when you feed it to mice, there's actually a 13% improvement in endurance. So, I'm kind of going through this technology fairly quickly, but I think what I'm hoping to show is that, the principle and the hypothesis of looking at elite athletes from a biological perspective, seeing what makes them unique or perform at an optimal level, using biotechnology, decoding their biology, seeing what's enriched in them. There's this whole wealth of discoveries that we could find that are beneficial for human performance, but also human health and nutrition. So I can't resist going back to superheroes for a second, because as anyone at Fitbiomics will tell you, around 25% of my daily cognitive time is spent thinking about Marvel Cinematic Universe and Endgame. But, I always like to think about this. If you Google Captain America and sort of what makes him a superhero, it's basically this unique ability to have speed, strength, endurance far greater than any Olympic athlete. And also the fact that his biology is able to sort of eliminate excessive buildup of fatigue-producing poisons. If you then Google the super soldier serum, and then you click on fatigue poisons, what actually comes up? Lactic acid. So as I like to say, we pretty much reverse engineered Captain America through biotechnology, and we found what makes him a superhero. And now this is something that we could apply to the masses to benefit human performance and health. I think another thing to consider, when you're working on all the science and you're cooped up in a lab and things like that, what is the relevance of this? Does anyone care? You go through all these years of working on biotechnology and science and yada, 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 and you publish papers, but does it mean anything? Does it have a broader impact? And, what I can say that was pretty cool is after we published this paper, it was actually covered by over 150 news outlets across the world. And what was exciting is that what this signaled to us is, not only sort of interest in the science, but also sort of pop culture and relevance and a demand for applying biotechnology to things that could be beneficial to the masses. So this was really cool for us. This was one of my favorite articles because they made a cartoon version of me where I was basically reverse engineering athletes and basketball players in a research lab, uncoding, unlocking what makes them special, and now, again, creating probiotics from their microbiomes, beneficial bacteria. So I'll kind of play this. This was also something that was fun. National Geographic covered us and did a video on us as well. Hopefully it plays.
From some of the most elite athletes in the world. So this is a freezer full of poop at minus 80 degrees Celsius. If you're going to store something, you got to store it right. But you got to keep in mind, you can't just think like fecal samples. You got to think, wow, there's just like millions of microorganisms that have potentially beneficial sort of properties in them. So within here could be the secrets that revolutionize sporting performance. I would say within here, there are the secrets that will revolutionize sports performance, athletics.
So that was pretty cool. And then they go on further, bringing it all back to St. John's.
For him, a former college basketball player, this isn't just merely academic pursuits. He's been to...
Oh, we got some connection problems.
Into the $40 billion probiotic market by eating basically a supercharged poop-derived supplement that he believes could increase speed and endurance, not just for athletes, but for average people looking to step up their game. Great thing about probiotics is the diversity of delivery options. So food, beverage, and supplements. It could be in a yogurt. It could be in a kombucha tea. It could be in a probiotic capsule or a pill. And that's just a start.
So, we had all this technology. We had all this great coverage. Again, going back to this, now what? I was a postdoc at Harvard. We published a paper, but who cares? So, again, for me, we're into technology, we're in athletics, we're in pop culture, we're now into nutrition, we're into performance, decoding biology of super performers and translating that to health and wellness for the masses. And then again, keeping in mind, each one teach one. We don't want to be cooped up in the lab building technology for the sake of technology's purposes. We want to translate our technology into broader communities. So, this is now transitioning into sort of the work that we do, Fitbiomics. I took you through being a ball player, then going to NYU, being a coach, now going to Harvard and merging these things together. Now, this is about how we're translating that into real world applications and taking our learnings and creating a business from that. And, this is what Fitbiomics is. We spun out of Harvard 2 years ago after developing this technology. And really what we're doing is we're decoding the biology of the most fit people in the world. We're understanding that information and translating it into food, beverage, and supplements.
Sorry, John.
Yep.
Sorry to cut you off, but we got a couple special guests that I want to at least acknowledge their presence. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we got Coach Jarvis in the room, and we're glad to have him online. Coach Jarvis was the head coach of St. John's from 1999 to 2003. Took us to an Elite Eight and also won an NIT when you were here, John. So let's welcome him.
Yeah.
And we also have another guest as well, Tyrone Grant, who's here with me. I think you spent some time with him, John, so you know him.
Hey, Jonathan. I see you too much, man. I see you too much.
Oh, man. Hey.
If I knew you was going to be on this call, I would have never came to Tyreek's house.
Oh, man.
Excuse me.
I knew you would make Alex laugh. So I just wanted to acknowledge those guests. And thank you, Coach Jarvis, for joining us. And thank you, Ty, for joining us. This is all about you, though, John. You can continue.
Oh, okay. I'll wrap it up because I want to catch up with Coach Jarvis and Tyrone and all that as well. So let me wrap this up because it's not about me. This is all about the community. So I'll just, kind of bring all this time, ball player, NYU, biotechnology, research, Harvard, now translating it to something that'll benefit the masses and taking this out. And I think obviously when you think about businesses, is there a need? Can we disrupt industries with technology? Is this relevant for people? I think if you look at sports nutrition now, if you look at health and wellness, it's pretty much, hey, I'll drink a Gatorade or I'll eat a Chobani yogurt. So I think the question is, can we do better than that? And then also I think from a business perspective, obviously if you're building a business, you need to make money and it needs to be sort of relevant. Would you believe that the health and wellness industry is a $4 trillion market? Would you believe that sports nutrition, is a $30 billion market and probiotics is a $50 billion market? So the question is, can we use our technology and our discoveries by decoding elite athlete microbiomes to really be disruptive in these industries? I'll just go through this. How do I start a company? And these are all these things, none of which I really knew how to do, especially raise money. You got to spend money to make money. Get a lawyer would be my big piece of advice. But I also want to keep the connection with basketball. I mentioned I went to NYU and I went to grad school. During my time, I actually coached the NYU law school team. And I remember talking to my friend who co-coached with me. I was like, I'm starting a company. I think I need some legal counsel. And he was like, well, John, why don't you just contact the team that you coached? And it turns out that sort of our legal counsel was someone that I coached on the basketball team. So the notion of being a part of a community and being involved in basketball can open up doors for you. And I'll just also share some other advice for you too. The notion of a lean startup and what we're doing, sort of developing products, the world has never seen before. You don't want to over-engineer. You don't want to perfect things. You want to bring these things out to the world and let the world react to them and tell you what they think of it so you could learn and iterate. Very much like playing in a game and making in-game adjustments, very much like being in a research lab and sort of failing but learning and iterating. I'll just skip to this because he's actually on now. One of my favorite quotes was actually when he won the NIT Championship game. And I remember we're at Madison Square Garden and we were going crazy. And someone basically spoke to Coach Jarvis and said, hey, Coach, you seem to have a problem executing down the stretch of games, but you still find a way to win. What's that all about? And this was one of the greatest answers I've ever heard in sort of an interview. He said, that is the execution. Find a way to win the game. And I just want to say, in terms of technology and startups and bringing products to market, it's very much the same thing. You're making things up as you go along. You're building the plane as you're flying it. And there's so many challenges and in-game adjustments. But really, at the end of the day, you're learning, you're iterating, and you're sort of finding a way to win. I just want to say there's a lot of cool things we're doing with Fitbiomics. We've translated this technology into real world products. We've sort of sent this out into the real world. We've taken these discoveries and these next gen probiotics. We've sent them out to over 900 folks. We're getting all sorts of cool positive feedbacks in terms of, digestion, recovery, wellness, performance. So we're really excited about this. Just in terms of the feedback. And again, technology, decoding elite biology, translating into products, disrupting major industries that are relevant to markets, and getting this feedback from consumers in a lean startup capacity. I'm excited to say that after all these years, 5 years of research at Harvard, 2 years of translating the technology with Fitbiomics, next year, I think this is the first time we're announcing it in public, we're actually going to be launching the world's first athlete-derived next-gen probiotic. I think everyone here, certainly on the call, we'd love to have you be a part of our community. We'd love to have you go to our website. We'd love to have you check it out and try our products and really be part of this new frontier. So I'll just wrap up here, kind of looking back. This was a picture from a couple of years ago when I went into the Under Armour store and I saw a St. John's number 11 uniform. And I was like, wow. This was me maybe 20 years ago. And now being a former basketball player, now being a scientist, but going back into the athletic community, I think it's a very interesting experience for me because something that motivates me is bridging the gap and building diverse communities. Even going back to the kids that I coached, in basketball and seeing them become teachers and entrepreneurs and coaches themselves. And again, thinking about sort of like pop culture and working with superheroes and how can we work with superheroes to sort of bring health and technology to the masses. Now, kind of sort of wrap it up here, I'm very much inspired by athletes and what they could do and how they could be role models and how they could transcend sports. And, I look at this picture, from LeBron James years ago and, at the pinnacle of his career, he took a risk and he came home and he took his learning from winning a championship and he went to give back to his community. So my last day at Harvard, I had them take this picture of me because, I went to Harvard to learn, to grow, to become an entrepreneur and a scientist. And then being in Boston for 6 years, which was a lot for a New Yorker, I made it a case in point to come home to New York, to bring what I learned and to bring this technology to the real world so we could benefit the masses. So I'll just kind of wrap it up there. It takes a team to achieve the dream. Marcus Hatton is part of the squad, as is Tim Parker. And, I just want to say again, thank you for this opportunity. Hopefully I wasn't too long-winded or all over the place, but, I'll kind of just wrap it up there.
Well, first off, an awesome presentation. Thank you so much. We're going to open this up to questions and have some conversation with the students. But before we do that, we lost Coach Jarvis a second ago. He's back. Want to acknowledge Coach Jarvis. Welcome. It's great to see you. And we've got a couple of your former players here, and John Scheiman is the feature guy, but also Tyrone Grant is here. And I think Mo Hatton will be joining too. So welcome, Coach, and thank you for joining us.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you very, very much. I am so sorry that I had some technical issues. I needed some help from Alex, which, he used to always help me with my technical issues. But Jonathan Scheinman, I've written about you. I've spoken about you. I forgot that you wore number 11, but I shouldn't be surprised because you were number 1 twice. And, for a guy to come to a great basketball institution like St. John's and to have the courage and the guts to not only try out for the team, but when he makes the team, to basically study to become a doctor and go through the rigorous practices and the travel and everything else.
Yeah.
I don't think words could ever describe, what you meant to us, the inspiration you gave us, and how much you helped our success. And I've always said, sometimes the last guys on the bench are the most important guys, and that certainly applied to John Scheinman, Dr. John Scheinman, number 11, but always number 1 in my heart.
Oh, man. Oh, my goodness. Coach, thank you so much. That means so much. Wow. Yeah, I don't know. I think we've spoken over the years, probably not as often as, we should. But, I always am grateful for the opportunity you provided me, allowing me to be a part of the team. I don't know how much of the lecture or the talk you heard, but I think at the end of the day, I've utilized so much of your knowledge to really help progress my career. And just by being on the team, like you told me, it opened up so many doors. And I think, as much as you taught me, most of it were skills for life off the basketball court. So, I am grateful for having you as a coach and a mentor, and I appreciate all your support over the years.
And John, I learned more from you. Trust me. So keep doing what you're doing. God will keep blessing you, and you'll keep giving back. And that's what it's all about.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Coach, for joining us, and hope you're well with your family. And please stay in touch, Coach.
I will. I'll see you at some games this year. Okay, that's
right. Here's Ty.
All right, hey Ty. And if that guy had stayed healthy, we would have won the national championship that year.
That's a fact. I believe that. Yes, 100%. So one other person I want to acknowledge before we open it up, and that's Ed Mineta. Ed was the AD during our time at St. John's, well, during your time, John, and actually my time too. Yeah, legendary AD, a lot for the athletic. And thank you for joining us, Ed, and welcome.
Thank you, Tariq. Good to see you, Coach, and congratulations, John. Wonderful presentation. So,
thank you.
Fantastic. We are very proud of you as St. John's alums, and I can tell you that it's great to see all the St. John's fans on here. And congratulations, Alex, to you and everybody else. And Coach Mike Jarvis down in Florida. Good to see you, man. Love to see you. We got your whole team together here. You got you, we got Dom, Alex, Tariq. We're ready to go.
Hey,
Yep, whole crew.
just bring on Duke. We got.
There you go.
I forgot to say we were 2-2 against Duke in my 4 years at St. John's. So, I just like to put that on record that we had a 500 record against Duke.
That's right. That's right. So John, before we open it up, I have a couple questions I want to kick it off with. And, you told a great story about your path going back to LaGuardia High School, growing up in Greenwich Village, going to St. John's, and then now in the professional world. I want to go back to your freshman year in 2000. What an experience. You win the Big East tournament your freshman year. You get to play with some great players like Lucy Thornton, LeVar Postel, Eric Barkley in the Garden. What was that like? And just talk about that experience as a student athlete.
I mean, again, I think you got to keep it to perspective. And, I'm just kind of, I figured I'd bring out the Big East Championship ring and kind of floss a little bit while we're on the line, but anyhow, I went to LaGuardia High School, which was a music and art school. And I think the learning curve was steep, walking onto St. John's, being an Elite 8 ball club. But I think I just learned so much. And one thing I'll say about that team is they were veterans on that team. They were like upperclassmen. And I came in as a true freshman, 17 years old. I had never lived outside of my apartment in my life. And I'm a Manhattan kid coming to Jamaica, Queens. So there were just so many memories. And I learned so much from everyone there. And I think it was formative years for me becoming, the student and athlete that I was, and of ultimately shaping me into becoming, sort of the adult that I am today.
Yeah, and then as you got further in your path, maybe you can talk about the transition you made. Like, how did you get into NYU? And also, you played some pro ball in Israel and then transitioned to science. So, I'm all over the place here, but you got to explain that, because that's a lot. Talk about NYU, how you got in, transitioning to Harvard, and then playing ball in Israel after college, and then going into science.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I always say to this day, whether it's on sort of an interview for grad school, interview for a postdoc at Harvard, an investor pitch, the one thing I always lead with is I'm a New Yorker and I played ball at St. John's. And I think just those statements alone sort of open up doors and they pique interest. And it's true, the story I told about NYU, my interview was the day of our semifinal NIT sort of like championship game at the Garden. And I actually remember there was someone on the interview that was from Duke. And actually, I think she remembered me from playing against Duke. And I remember she said to me, she was like, John, this is kind of an unfair home court advantage that you have right now, playing ball at St. John's, now interviewing at NYU. So, the one thing I always say is just like be yourself, and let your passion shine. And I think people will gravitate towards that and they'll give you an opportunity. And just like Coach Jarvis and Alex gave me an opportunity to walk onto the team, once you get that opportunity, you work your butt off to like stay on the team or stay in grad school or stay at Harvard or keep building a company. So I think just being a ball player and working hard and practice every day lends itself to a natural transition to being a scientist and an entrepreneur.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I'd like to open it up to the students, and I hope they have some questions or thoughts. We just want to allow you guys to have a conversation with John.
Just FYI, Big East Championship hat from 20 years ago. I only wore it once. I never washed it, but I wanted to bring it out for this talk.
You brought everything, the rings, the hat,
you know what they say, the rings and things you sing about, bring them out. That's what we're doing tonight.
Yeah, these students, that's probably a little old for the students. That's our era, but I'm with you though. I'm with you. Do we have any questions? Well, I have a couple others, so maybe that'll prompt some other questions.
Absolutely.
So, for the students that are listening tonight, what advice? You've already given some advice, but is there any advice that you would follow or give them in terms of developing mentors and just patterning their career off of someone that they kind of respect or look up to in their respective field? And even if they don't know what they want to do, just the whole idea of finding mentors Maybe you could shed some light on that.
Yeah, I think really, for me, college was all about learning as much as you can, exploring different career paths and classes, and learning what you're passionate about, and interacting with as many, people as possible. For me, again, I grew up in Greenwich Village, New York. One of the biggest things I believe in is evolution and diversity, and how diversity is a requisite for evolution. And I think just surrounding yourself with as many diverse people as possible, smart people, with really different ideas and perspectives. And I think that allows you to learn, but also find out more about yourself. And I think it's just really putting yourself in positions where you're uncomfortable. I was a tuba player at LaGuardia. I then walked on to a basketball team that was like nationally ranked. That was uncomfortable. And then being a basketball player, I went to a biomedical program for a Ph.D., which was uncomfortable. And then after, getting a Ph.D. in molecular oncology, I went to Harvard to work on biotechnology, which was uncomfortable. And now being a scientist, starting a company. But I think the thing is, if you think differently, you put yourself in uncomfortable positions, you surround yourself with diverse people, you'll find out more about yourself and you'll evolve into the person and the career path that you want to have.
I love that. That's really, really a great point. I see. Is that John? John Diffley.
Yes. Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Thanks, Tariq. Thanks, John. Great presentation. Really, really great to hear you. Really tremendous passion. Congratulations on all the success. Question maybe for you to just share, basically the startup piece of it and how complicated that was. I know some funding, and you have a great team you have assembled. You have Alex here and some other people that I was fortunate to meet in the past. Maybe speak to that a little bit in your transition into the private sector.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting sort of transition in general in terms of technology and biotechnology, not so much being about academic research and R&D, but really translating things that'll have positive impacts on society. And I knew early on, I never wanted to be a professor or PI. I never wanted to write grants. I wanted to be in a position where, again, we could take technology out into the real world. Like everything in my life, it's a steep learning curve, and just like being a scientist, most of the things you do, doesn't work. You have to learn, you have to iterate, and you have to evolve. Just like being a basketball player, you have so many failures, you miss so many shots, but it's about practicing and getting better. So I think it's been challenging, but I think the thing that I continue to be encouraged by is the belief that we're building something that's transformative, that we're building a new frontier of like nutrition, health and wellness. And most importantly, we're not relying on this being sort of only to privileged communities like Harvard or MIT. We're sort of using pop culture as a medium to make this technology accessible to the masses. And I think that's the trick, bridging the gap between communities, educating, empowering, and telling our story. And I think, a lot of people gravitate towards that. So, yes, raising money is hard. But I think if you believe in what you're doing, and you believe in the bigger purpose, you'll stay the course and you'll see it through. Man, I sound like I'm pretty cliched. Dang, I don't mean to be this cliched. I feel like I'm talking like an athlete after like we won a game or something like that. Maybe, I don't know. Sorry about that.
No, listen, man, with this platform we have now, where everyone is on Zoom and WebEx, it's only natural to feel like that because you keep hearing yourself. And you're doing great, man. I have one last question, unless anyone else has a question. And this is not my question, but Dom gave me this question that someone came up with. And I think it's a really good question. What about individuals that are not athletes? Can your research be applicable to the everyday man or woman? Or is your focus just on athletes?
No, and I think that's a great point. And, maybe I rushed through the Fitbiomics aspect of what we're doing. And I think, again, this is all about accessibility. And I think if you look at my story, right, I wanted to play in the league. I didn't make the league. 0.00001% of ball players make the league. So most of us are not going to play in the NBA. But I think really, can we sort of learn from super performers and benefit everyone else? And if you look at Fitbiomics, like we want to work with elite athletes to understand their biology. They're also influencers. We want to educate. We want to empower. But really for us, it's about everyone else. It's about fitness enthusiasts. It's about weekend warriors. It's about health seekers. It's about people that just want to be more fit or more active, and basically providing them with new technology and innovations to help them be the best versions of themselves. So again, each one teach one. Let's take our learnings, let's take our advancements, let's take our technology and now make that accessible to everyone, and broad communities, diverse communities, and make this more participatory, and expose people, and not just for athletics. I'd also see, yes, we want to make the next LeBron James or Michael Jordan or stuff like that, but we also want to inspire the next generation of scientists, the next generation of entrepreneurs, and sort of hopefully this story from athlete to scientist to CEO could resonate across all those different spectrums and gradients.
We got one last question coming in the chat, and we'll end with this. I'm just going to read what the person put in the chat. It said, Jonathan, great talk. The use of superheroes and sci-fi movies as an inspiration really resonated with me. My question is, there was a recent piece in the Atlantic that covers the great lengths the rich 1% of parents go to get their kids into Ivy League sports teams. Since sports is a path of upward mobility for a lot of kids, what are your thoughts on the potential ramifications of your tech only being accessible to rich parents?
I love it. I love it. I love this question.
Let me finish. He said, what are your thoughts on the potential ramifications of your tech only being accessible to rich parents and making it harder for poorer kids?
I love this question, and I will be long-winded on this if this is the last question of the evening, and I will share my story. I went to public schools my life. I went to an arts high school. I grew up in a rent-stabilized apartment. My parents grew up, sort of in Jewish ghettos on the Lower East Side. They got PhDs. I commuted to St. John's. I lived with my grandfather in Rego Park. I got an academic scholarship. I then sort of had to work to get, walk onto the team and then get a PhD from NYU. And, while I was in grad school, I also coached a lot of underprivileged kids in the inner cities. And while I was a basketball coach, one of the things that really resonated with me is, can we teach, inner city communities, at-risk communities, underprivileged communities more than just basketball or sports? Can we teach them about technology and new opportunities for career paths? And very much that's what motivated me to go to Harvard and to start Fitbiomics. And as I mentioned earlier, whether it's sort of like the Black Panther and, setting up new technology from Wakanda into Oakland, or LeBron James coming home from Miami to Cleveland, winning a championship, but starting a school, really for Fitbiomics is we're taking this cutting edge technology, years of research, whether it's at NYU or Harvard or MIT, publications, clinical trials, and we're using sports as a medium to make it accessible to everyone. And we're doing it in a manner where, it isn't just to the 1% or to Ivy League schools. It's about giving back and each one teach one. And that is something that motivates me every day, from my parents to me being a ball player, to being a New York City kid, to being a St. John's kid. How can we take our learnings? How can we translate it and make it accessible to everyone? And that's our mission statement, diversity, inclusion, and evolution. And that's what Fitbiomics believes in. And being a St. John's ball player and growing up in the city, that's sort of what we live by.
Well, I appreciate it, John. That's all the time we have. I want to thank everyone involved in this event. Special shout out to Alex Evans, who is the glue behind all of these get-togethers with former players. He put this whole thing together with Dom. Thank you so much to both of you guys. Dr. Jonathan Scheiman, wish you the best. You are a great example to our students, our student athletes, on using the game and using your platform at St. John's to open up doors for yourself and others. So thank you so much. There's a lot of other people involved. I'm not going to go through everyone, but John Diffley, Kevin James, Christine Munch, Coach Anderson, who's not on here, the head coach of the basketball program now, Ed Manetta, everyone involved. We just want to thank, and the students most importantly, because this is about you. This is about the students, and trying to connect with you guys and inspire you guys for when you're out in the world in your own career. So just want to thank everyone, and Dr. Scheiman, thanks again for everything. We wish you the best, and please stay close to the school and continue to stay connected with these students.
Absolutely. Thank you. And anyone on this call, any students, please feel free to email us, hit us up on Fitbiomics, whatever way we could give back. And I appreciate being a part of this community. Johnny for life.
Signing off. Everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Great job.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.